Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Lena Waithe and Rishi Rajani, producers of the acclaimed new HBO documentary Being Mary Tyler Moore that premiered May 26th on HBO and streams on Max. Well, it's so interesting because few people, least of all, I'm sure Mary herself, you guys, would expect the two of you to be the ones who would be inspired to make a documentary about her. More likely some old white dudes, and neither of you are old or white unless my eyes are failing me, which is possible. And one of you isn't even a dude at all. Um, but Lena, let's start with you. How is it that a queer Black woman from the South Side of Chicago is heavily influenced by and interested in making a doc about Mary Tyler Moore? Were you a big fan growing up?
Um, I grew up on 90s television, but a cool thing about 90s TV was that Nickelodeon had a love. Once I was sort of done watching all my shows on Nickelodeon and I would be up till, midnight watching TV, it would do this really cool thing where it would, venture over into something called Nick at Night, where older TV shows would air, such as Dick Van Dyke Show and eventually Mary Tyler Moore Show. Dick Van Dyke Show was really heavily on Nick at Night, and Mary Tyler Moore Show kind of came into my life a little bit later, which is kind of telling that they wanted to kind of give that Mary role a little bit more shine than Mary Richards. But in high school, once I kind of found the Mary Tyler Moore Show and also looked at the Dick Van Dyke Show, I was really fascinated that it was the same woman in both of these two very iconic sort of pillar-like TV shows, and the characters could not have been further apart. So I was just sort of fascinated by this woman, and I decided to read her memoir. It was a time in high school I was reading a bunch of memoirs. I was really fascinated by people's lives, and I read her memoir after all, and became just sucked in by her career, by what had happened to her in her real life, and just by how the person behind the persona was very different. And I was just really, blown away by it. And I just started to learn more and more about her as I became a television writer and seeing her impact on TV in terms of women writers being in rooms and us still fighting that fight today. And so I think initially I thought I wanted to do a biopic because, I'm a writer first. And I just thought that would be the natural way in. But when mentioning my love for her in the Vanity Fair article, her widower, Dr. Robert Levine, who was also a producer on this documentary, reached out and invited me to come to what was once their estate. He lives there on his own now in Connecticut. And I went and I sat with him for hours and we talked, and I got to see her office and I got to see her Emmys and the mural of her and it's a sprawling estate, and everything was sort of just as it was, and I could feel her spirit in the house still. And I just decided that it needed to be a documentary, and that's why we do feature that house, so that you guys can get a sense of what I felt when I was there, seeing all those bound scripts, and it was like this library of television history. And he trusted me, and he could see the love and the passion I had that was very pure. There wasn't this mission to take her down or figure out the secret. It was more, I wanted to know more about who this person was and really give her due. And he came along the journey, and I asked James Adolphus to come direct, because I'm not really a director. I'm more of a writer and a producer, and an ideator. And James didn't know anything about her, which I thought was exciting, because I just worked on a documentary with him. He had interviewed me in a way that felt very intentional and empathetic and human. And I knew I couldn't be at every interview for this, because it would take me away from a lot of stuff. And so I knew I could trust him to sit across from people and ask real questions, not surface level questions. And that's really how it happened. I think people kind of assume, they may know by looking at you what you're influenced by or what you like, and it's just not true. My influences I have a wide range of them, and I think being a student of television, television there's so many stories and there's so many things you can be inspired by, and I really was just fascinated by this TV titan, who kind of, like I said in the doc, sort of lit a fire with a very, very delicate match.
And again, it was that 2018 Vanity Fair cover story about you, shot by Annie Leibovitz, and
Correct.
And there was a Hollywood Reporter story.
Yeah.
Where you floated the idea of the biopic.
Well, yeah, just the idea of, they asked what you want to do, and I was like, I'd love to explore that. And And I was really grateful that Dr. Levine saw that and reached out. And that's really where our relationship began. And it's grown obviously over these past 5 years. And we're more than colleagues. He's someone who will just check in over the holidays and things like that. He's genuinely the sweet man that you see in the documentary and that Mary Tyler Moore fell in love with in that last chapter of her life. And he's just a lovely human. And he was just been such a great, colleague on this because he's a collaborator, because obviously a lot of that home footage comes from him that he found in the basement and sort of took the dust off and let us put into the movie, which gives people, I think, a more in-depth look at who she was as a person and rather than just these characters that they've identified with for all these years.
That's one of the things that's absolutely fascinating is I learned so much about her, and I didn't think I needed. I didn't think there was that much more to learn about her than I already knew,
Right.
which is really to your credit. And Rishi, I know you and Lena are principals in the production company Hillman Grad. Do you have any personal connection to Mary yourself in terms of growing up watching Dick Van Dyke or Mary Tyler Moore or Ordinary People or anything like that?
No, actually, I'm very new to the world of Mary Tyler Moore. I said I was born in London, and my parents raised me very much on British television, in Faulty Towers, and even older school, Laurel and Hardy, and those types of things as well. So when I came into Hillman Grad, and Lena was actually already working on the Mary Tyler Moore project. And so I got to be sort of almost like discovering Mary as we were making the process of the documentary, which I think was a really interesting point of view as someone who didn't grow up with it. But I think the Mary's effect on America, American culture, American television is so evident. And I think you see it from the documentary, but even just in the conversations we've been having with people that both work in the business and outside of the business. Mary was massive and had such considerable impact. So I think it's been really fun for me to get an education in Mary, but also an education into American TV throughout this process.
Yeah.
And what you learned while you were researching, so different than the Mary that we think we know from her roles on TV. That there was often, well, people have said, I remember when Ordinary People came out, that that's really closer to the real Mary Tyler Moore. I'm not necessarily sure that's true, but there was certainly a curtain of sadness and a certain amount of tragedy around her. You certainly found that and incorporated that into the doc.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of loss in her life. Her son, her only son, which was, a devastating loss. It actually happened like a week after the premiere of Ordinary People. So she sort of had to grieve a son on screen and then had to do it in real life after the film was done, which is just such a tragic thing for her to have to live through. And I don't think she was ever the same after that, which is very clear in the documentary. But also lost her younger sister, who was more like a sister to her son, because they were obviously a similar age, and obviously the loss of her brother. So there was a lot of loss in her life. And also there was a lot of, her mother being an alcoholic and her still falling victim to that in her own life, her never really feeling as if she had her father's approval. And she's still a girl born in Brooklyn. So there's sort of a wall, a shell, a coldness, a strength that sort of comes with that. And I think that, there's interesting because people are very mortified by the first interview that we start the documentary out with. So you get a real sense of what it was like to be a woman at that time. But also the later interview where there's a woman interviewing her, we don't get to see as much because the camera's mostly on Mary. But she even says, if I had reached out to hug you, a few years ago, I'm not sure you would have, embraced me back. And I think that's sort of interesting in that, people assume that if you're a woman, you're supposed to be warm. You're supposed to be inviting. You're supposed to be, welcoming to everyone. And that's sort of a stereotype that we don't always have to fit into. So I think I really appreciated the fact that Mary, was sort of a product of her own time and was a feminist in her own way. And I think that to me was what was so fascinating, and that she didn't, Gloria Steinem, who I respect deeply, also took the show to task. And we bring that up in terms of people wanting the Mary Tyler Moore show to be more feminist than it was, and you see Valerie Harper trying to, explain that they're doing all that they can in the 70s on primetime television on Saturday night. And so there's always been a pressure to do more and to be more. And so I think that's what was also so fascinating too, is to see that it doesn't matter what time you're in. There's always a pressure when you're first, when you're an only, to be everything. And I think she sort of carried that burden quite well, and did it. So it always seemed to be cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, Rishi, what surprised you, I mean, the most in your research? Was it the fact that she was maybe kind of a reluctant feminist, that she had so much loss and had to, had that her persona as a human being was so different than what we saw on TV? We all assumed that she had this charmed life, and it was really anything but.
Yeah. I think it was really surprising to see that it wasn't really until later in her life that she got to live like this free single life, in a way, and actually get to experience sort of a little bit of the life that she was capturing on television. I feel like she was a woman caught between a lot of different pressures of being this person to the public, of trying to be, a good partner, a good mother, all the things that we force women to do in our society, is to wear all these different hats and be exceptional at them. So I think it was really surprising to see her, her not getting to do that till later in her life, but it was also really gratifying to see that. I think that you could see a lightness that exists in her when she's able to go spend that time where she lives in New York and is living in her little apartment and by herself, and getting to date and getting to have friends and getting to be and pursue the art that she wanted to pursue as well, and go on stage. And so it was certainly that was, I think, like, in terms of her life, the thing that really I was a little bit shocked by, that it took her a long time to be able to be a truly like free individual.
Yeah, it also kind of.
Go ahead, Lena.
It also surprised me because people are asking like, "What surprised you?" I was like, "It's tough because I've been doing research really since I was in high school, so there's a lot of things I didn't know, but I didn't know, because I don't think she wrote about this part, but we discovered in the documentary that she didn't like New York her first go around, which was so surprising to me, because it's like, how can you not love New York? Now, maybe because of the experience she had, obviously Breakfast at Tiffany's was really hard on her. It was really tough. Obviously her and Grant really loved their life in Los Angeles, but I was happy to see that when she returned to New York, as a divorcee, a little bit older, and, obviously had a better turn on Broadway. It just got a chance to enjoy it, because I love going to New York, solo and having a good time. So that was a very interesting thing, that New York kind of had to grow on her, because I love how she talks about it the second time around versus how she talks about it in the beginning.
Yeah, it seemed like, just based on the way you put the doc together, both of you, Lena and Rishi, that the last third of her life may have been the happiest, even though she suffered from diabetes and everything else, just because she could let her hair down and didn't have to be what somebody else expected her to be. You also, both of you guys make an interesting choice featuring only audio. And both Mary, which is very powerful, having her narrate her own story. But the other interview subjects, also like James Brooks and Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Dick Van Dyke, being only audio. What was behind that
idea? I had sort of given that note about like 8 months in. I was just looking at an interview that our director did, and someone asked him about that, and he said, "Yep, that was a direct note from Lena." But I remember that day. I think there was just something where I don't want anything we do to feel like anything else, and I also don't want anything that you expect to come at you. So I just was like, people want to see Mary. People want to see Mary. That's why they're here. And there's so much, footage that we can discover and we can find. And I think you also listen more closely when it's just audio. And I thought it made more sense for us to pair the audio with really interesting imagery rather than watching a talking head. And so I'm really grateful to the team for trusting me on that one and for believing in it, because I know it was a bit of a risk. And it feels like it's one that paid off. And so I'm really grateful that people aren't too bothered by it, because I think what you realize is when the documentary is done, you feel I hope, you feel very satisfied, and you feel like you got a chance to spend a lot of time with this icon.
Have you gotten a lot of feedback just about that audio only
Yeah,
creative
people
choice?
really like it. Yeah, people really like it. Jenny Connor, who was one of my first bosses, she also show ran Girls, and she's a single drunk female. She's a phenomenal. She's a TV titan herself, Jenny Connor, and she DM'd me and said how much she liked that choice, and a couple other people have said so, and they reached out, and I'm really grateful because it's something that people actually point out and they single it out. And maybe it's something that's refreshing. Maybe it's something that it's also sort of done the Donna Summers documentary as well, which can be streamed on Max too. Who I got a chance to meet Brooklyn, who is Donna Summer's daughter. You know, we did a panel together, and we exchanged documentaries simply because we got, you know, we're dealing with women in the 70s and them sort of both changing things. Obviously, one in music and other in television, and we both had the same thought. And so we were really excited about that when we exchanged docs, and really, it was a really cool thing. And I'm glad we went with those decisions because I think it sort of sucks you in a little bit more, and you forget you're watching a documentary.
You do actually. I agree with that. What was the process like, Rishi, in combing through Mary's personal archives? Was that a huge challenge? It seemed you put so much information into this thing. It seems like it would take years just to put that all in order.
Yeah, I think it's really a testament to the incredible team that we had on the documentary.
Yeah.
Obviously you have Lena, who originated it, and we brought on Deborah Martin Chase, who is, feels like such a kinship with Mary and grew up watching Mary. But then on the production side, we had James, who brought such a level of empathy towards like actually combing through Mary's archives as our filmmaker, and building a real relationship with Dr. Robert Levine to be able to kind of identify what are those like most impactful moments in Mary's life. But in addition to James, we also had Ben Selko, who brought a wealth of experience on the documentary side, has been a showrunner and producer and filmmaker of incredible documentaries, who's James' producing partner. And they had a wonderful editor in Mariah, who I think was really that kind of key cornerstone of the team with James and with Ben to be able to synthesize like the massive amounts of archival that are out there on Mary to find everything that you saw in the documentary, including some like really exciting moments. Like we loved kind of the bachelorette party scene in I mean that was like such a extraordinary last minute find for us
From,
to
I mean, with
from Robert Levine. Yes.
yeah.
No, I was going to say with Betty White.
Yeah. Such a great find at the last hour. Robert Levine found that tape like in the basement of their house because there's just like a bunch of stuff they were lovely enough to keep, and that was something that we really wanted to make space for and include because you get to see Mary with letting her hair down and being very comfortable. And I love that her mom is there, as they sort of had a bit of a turbulent relationship, but was still there during that time. Obviously, her mother and father attended her, that wedding. And Betty White, obviously. And it's just such a sweet, lovely human moment. And I think you can't not relate to that joy.
See, it seems like you also had a wonderful working relationship with Dr. Levine. He just seems like an amazing human being. That really comes across that he's sort of a gentle soul. But it sounds like you really bonded with him just on that first meeting, and it was all, full steam ahead from there.
Yeah. We obviously he's in New York and I'm based in LA, but we shared so many lovely emails. And he's like such a great email writer. I try to step my game up when I respond. But it's always so loving and sweet and kind, and there's no agenda, and he's just sort of like a father figure who is just you get it. You get why she fell for him, and you get why he was the one of the great loves of her life. And this documentary would not be possible without his involvement, without his love, without his his
access
approval.
to all that stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah. So he's a big part of why this documentary feels, I think, the way it does.
What kind of response, Rishi, have you gotten from the public since it's premiered, which I guess is only about less than a week as we sit here today?
Yeah. I mean, it's been an amazing response. And I think like the part of the response that I think Lena and I have been talking about a lot is how personal the response is. The amount of people that are coming up and talking about, well, like, oh, Mary made this kind of impact on my life. And I'm so happy that you were able to celebrate her legacy because, you know, it was a big deal when she wore pants on screen and we weren't allowed to wear pants at school. And you know, and the amount of people that felt really seen by her. Like Mary had this like incredible ability to connect with people through the TV screen, and to a degree where people, I think, when they talk to us about the documentary, it's not like they're talking to us about a movie or another public figure. It's like they're talking to us about a friend, and a friend that they really appreciate us celebrating. And that's been it's been a phenomenal, and it's a testament to the filmmaking, and it's a testament to Mary and the legacy that she had.
Everybody feels like they have a personal connection to her, so they're going to be watching this through very, very personal eyes. That's all the time we have. Lena Waithe and Rishi Rajani, you're terrific, and it really is terrific. I was completely into this from the first minute. I was going to take a couple of days to watch little pieces of it, and I just went right through and couldn't stop. Like a great book you can't put down. Your terrific documentary, Being Mary Tyler Moore, can be seen this month on HBO and streaming on Max. Good luck this Emmy season to you both.
Thank you.
I know you're going for your second Emmy right now, Lena. But that kind of thing never gets old. And thanks for visiting with us at Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the kind words. It means a lot.